All right, here we are. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Today's the Decentral Life Q1 update, or at least about halfway through Q1. With me, I've got Todd Markey in the office, and we're in fact in the new office headquarters in Greenwood Village, Colorado. And so welcome. If you want to tune in next week on the WDLF.net network, we're going to have some video, a little video tour of the new office for you. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with the update. Of course, for those of you who are new to our company, Decentral Life is a tech business incubator for companies that are in both blockchain, AI, social networking, and e-commerce. And of course, what we are focused on right now really has been the blockchain space for quite a while. I know, I've been hit up frequently over the last couple of weeks. I know you have too, with all of the AI chatter with Chat GPT, and of course, those people who are not familiar with OpenAI and Chat GPT, it's been around now for a while. We've incorporated using API feeds from Open API, their services now for a number of years. And so we've actually been in the AI space for quite some time. So for those of you who are asking if we are going to be incorporating that into our technology and our platform, and even helping companies that are focused on that, well, the answer is we have been, and we will continue to be. So I want to just make sure that we've got our fantastic little safe harbor here. Let me get that up. Of course, we're always going to talk about, as we have in the past, things that could happen, things that might not happen, things we hope that happen. And of course, for so many of you who have been tuning in for the last year or so, we have been working towards the acquisition of MJ Link. That's been a real focus for both of us. And it has been a challenging time in the cannabis industry in general. We have explored multiple options over the last year or so with getting the company public. And I know for you as retail shareholders and holders in our company, that what's really important to you is that we're making this progress. But what's even more important, of course, is the post-acquisition part. And making sure that, of course, it's with the right company, and obviously it has a growth trajectory after that acquisition that's very healthy for all of the clients and consumers and businesses that are connected to that company. Many companies, when we launched the MJ Microcap event a few years ago, many companies became very dependent on that connection with potential investors in the cannabis space, and so on and so forth. And so we wanted to make sure that whoever took over the company, and we will continue to aid in that process, but whoever took over the company was going to have a similar vision than we did. Right. And so we're excited that all came together. And of course, I'm sure you're excited that it's finally happened. So we made that announcement this afternoon to all, first and foremost, to all of the MJ Link private shareholders that invested in the company through that Reg A offering a few years ago. And now it's exciting for us anyway, because we get to start focusing on what the next few years is going to look like for that company. Yep. So moving right along, and we'll take some questions here in a few minutes. We've had a lot of questions come in over the last few days and week or so. We'll cover those as well. But we've been super busy here for the last number of months, especially going into Q1. Because for Hunt Post, which you probably see part of their logo thing here behind us, they have been very focused on all of the trade shows that take place in Q1 of each year. Moreover, with their acquisition campaign of a few operators in the trade show industry, what we have been working on with Hunt Post and their executive staff is to try to get a solid half a dozen or so operators. And to our surprise, maybe, I guess in hindsight it's clear, but in about the middle or towards the end of January, there was so much positive response to that campaign that they are now approaching 20 LOIs with trade show operators, which would entail about, let's call it over 70 trade shows. Yeah. I was going to say about 75, 76, but I think it depends. And so that's going to continue to move forward. They may end up with 30. Yep. Who knows? But the thing that you need to understand as it relates to our business plan is through, of course, the liquidity events. That's always a key term that's out there. Liquidity events. What does that mean? Well, it means for Decentral Life that given that we have a 15% stake in these companies and we receive 5% of the revenue in these companies, that's a big step up when one of the companies goes through either an IPO or an acquisition. And now we've got the two that are all lined up for just that. Have had those two for quite some time now, but you get closer and closer and closer. And the real positive here, if you don't understand how this works, especially as it relates to Hunt Post and going public, is that you have this balance sheet through these acquisitions of trade show operators that ends up on that company. Means when it goes public, it's worth a lot more, and we have 15% stake in that. It also means that the more operators and all of the exhibitors that work with those operators ultimately end up on the balance sheet that we get 5% of, right? So all good stuff. Okay, I've been talking quite a bit. So
well, when these deals continue to expand, as Ken is referencing, and of course that's only great news for ourselves, for Hunt Post, and for shareholders. It just there's a greater magnitude on making sure that all the T's are crossed properly and all the I's are dotted, so that we don't accrue any mistakes that delays the process any further. And of course, as you guys all know, we're always trying to move a million miles a minute, and there are so many things that we are excited and eager to get done. And unfortunately, at times we need to follow procedures and go through legal. And as it relates to acquisitions of a publicly traded company, or in dealing with publicly traded companies like our own, there are disclosure requirements and procedures that need to be taken. So we appreciate everyone's patience, and we're really excited to kind of get to this point. And I know it's been a while since, I for one have gotten to communicate. So this is part of my favorite, thing that we do here is this communication aspect. So a lot of hard work to get where we are now.
Yeah, talk about biting off more than you can chew as a phrase, and sometimes that's just what happens, especially when things are going your way. Typically, we have an expectation timeline of what's going to happen with each of the companies. They're all operating in different sectors. So sectors, of course, right now, given the current economic landscape is not just here in the US, but internationally, really does adjust each of those sectors. Mm-hmm. And for us, certainly in the hunting, fishing, camping, RV space, etc., that hasn't really been too affected. As far as in a positive way, it has been. But that just ends up meaning that we've got so much more paperwork to go through and companies to go through, and the list gets longer and longer and longer as you add more and more operators to it. I'll give you an example. The average acquisition typically takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And so as we're helping these companies go through multiple acquisitions, 20 plus acquisitions with one of the companies, you can just imagine, and trying to get that done in a very short period of time, not 20 times 18 months, obviously, then it just means that we're pulling 80, 100 hour weeks, and we're trying to get through all of that as quickly as possible. And then you look at the cannabis industry, which is always an optimistic industry, not just here in the US, but internationally. And optimistic that regulation is going to come in and start to to create a real path for these companies to be operating, not just sort of in the legal space, but 100%, including banking and financing and growth capital, et cetera. And so, you get into November and the elections thinking that it's going to go one way, and then it's kind of jumping back and forth, and then you end up where we're at currently here in the United States with quite the stalemate in Congress, and it'll likely stay that way for a while. Thankfully, that did not derail our campaign with MJ Link.
Yep.
And a lot of the delays there is just for our side and their side is to make certain that we're first in agreement of the future and the growth, but we also see eye to eye on when do we think that regulation could potentially happen, and how will that affect the companies, and how can we best navigate that moving forward, especially for all the other companies that are dependent on the company post the acquisition. So that's important. All right, so we've talked about HuntPost, we've talked about MJ Link. There's a lot for us to talk about, but as I mentioned in our last update, what we're going to be doing this quarter and into the rest of the year is taking a lot of that conversation and putting it off to the side with those individual executives. And so now that we're in the new office space, we've got a new podcast and video production room here. So we'll be doing more of those live interviews specifically with them. But what I'd like to do is get into a lot of the Q&A, because we've had quite a bit of that come in over the last, guys, you're going to watch me try to figure out where my screen is at here. But we've had a lot of that coming through in the last week or so. So I want to address all of it. Okay. Oh, I'm over here off to the side. Thank you. Okay, here we go. A lot of call signs here, so I wish that we could address you by your first names. I believe this is Aaron, and he's got a few questions if you want to jump right in.
So Aaron's asking for about updates about upcoming milestones that we can share about the WDLF security token offering, generally about STOs.
So I don't want to go on and on and on about what's happening in the crypto markets. Most of you have been trying to tune in to what's happening in the crypto markets. We have a lot of information on what happens kind of behind the scenes, if you will, especially given how much research we're doing as it relates to regulation and kind of the changing of the guards. But I'm going to try to sum it up real simple. The crypto markets obviously started as a response to what happened in 2008 and the real estate market crash and some of the exposure that took place, certainly with the banking industry. And but the technology isn't limited to just currency and the banking problem that so many of these people saw early on. And it expands well beyond that. We've talked about it in the past, so I won't do that right now. But in short, you're talking about digital securities in companies versus paper stock certificates. And of course, only in the last couple of decades, since the internet has provided the ability for people to trade online and use different exchanges like your E-Trade and whatnot to do their trading, has it begun to become a digital platform. But the blockchain fast forwarded all of that. Now, keep in mind that you have early adopters in any of these technologies, and it's almost always the nerds, right? Like ourselves. So it's the techie people. It's not the people who don't understand tech. And here we are, a solid decade later, and the non-tech people are starting to try to figure it out. And so we will be spending more and more time this year really kind of laying out that education. We began this process last year with Deck Block, which is really our blockchain education company, which has an event, a conference that it puts on to not only spotlight a number of our own companies and other companies that don't even participate with us, but also to educate those people who maybe like yourself are trying to learn as much as you can to give yourself that edge on what type of companies to invest in the future through digital tokens and security tokens, and what type of companies to stay away from, and how it all works. What things you need, be it a digital wallet to access to some great online tools to do your research. So that being said, WDLF token is still thriving. It gets mined through each of our networks in the software licensing that we do with the different companies. It is coming to an end of life, if you will, as it relates to how much of that we had set aside to be mined versus how much will go out and now be able to start selling and raising capital. But there are many, many steps that we predicted early on that the SEC was going to put in place regulation-wise that we'd have to go through. And I was extremely happy that the SEC has made so much progress.
And just so that you guys know, I mean, this is something that we've always speculated and we've encouraged in this space. We've always believed that we need greater transparency and greater regulation in the cryptocurrency sector, and that has started to come to fruition. Of course, they need to be very smart about how they do that, and I won't get into speculating about what might be the right strategy or the wrong strategy. I know there's been some talk about what they might do with stable coins. But I think it's very important to note for anyone who's listening to keep an eye on the things that are said and the announcements that come out of the SEC. Gary Gensler is very vocal about this. He's the SEC chairman. And it's important to note that we have understood the importance of regulation in this sector, and being on the right side of compliance is something that we've always structured into our pathway forward with securitized token offerings. And when Gary Gensler has made any announcements about this, tokenization is something that he's always referenced positively, and needing more regulation and needing more education generally to Wall Street and the financial sector. And that's something that we've always kind of laid the framework to be able to provide.
A few weeks ago, he had posted that on Twitter and other places that they are growing closer and closer to being able to provide the right regulation for brokers to be able to start trading cryptocurrencies, certainly holding that cryptocurrency, be it Bitcoin or whatever else, security tokens, digital securities in startup companies and in existing companies, so that you can, if you don't want to be trading those yourself, have your broker doing it. And that's a huge step forward, and has been at the heart of our education for these other companies for this past year. And what it's going to do, I'll give you a little look underneath the curtain here. What it's going to do is provide us even more pathway to pair up the deck block event and the MJ microcap event as a 2-day event moving forward. We think that could happen as early as the last week of April, but certainly here in the next couple of months, so that we're not just educating any company about cryptocurrency and the use of it in their own operations, but as well as using digital tokens as securities in their companies, but now doing it in the cannabis space as well. So there's that crossover, which is pretty cool synergy. Yes, to answer your question and then move on, eventually the token will be offered on other exchanges and hopefully Coinbase one day. All right, so let's move right down to KB. I don't know exactly who that is, but
so yeah, KB, he was talking about how we indicated during previous conversations that negative market conditions were not an issue for achieving company goals. If that's still the case, and what maybe might else have changed?
Well, it is. Look, anytime. The short answer is that it doesn't really matter what the market conditions are. It's not going to adjust our business model or our business plan. Like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, sometimes what's happening in the market can affect one sector in a negative way and one of the other sectors that we're in a very positive way, just as it has. It had some negative effect to some degree, although I think in hindsight it'll be great for us because of how much research we had to go back and do looking forward in the cannabis space. On the flip side of that, it had a lot of positive aspects for HuntPost, Leica Re is another company that I think is going to hit their liquidity event and be acquired and move on sometime soon. And tough market conditions in the real estate industry were a perfect setup for that.
Right.
I had been talking about that for years. That network had more potential in a down real estate market than it did in an up real estate market, where really everyone's so busy doing real estate that they don't need to spend as much time on the platform. And so here they are having to. So I think it's worked out real well.
I think it's also important to note here that, we had always indicated that it wasn't contingent upon regulatory reform in the cannabis sector in order for us to be able to find partnerships and move forward in a meaningful way. And obviously, we've shown that is the case with this, acquisition here, which we feel is incredibly synergistic and timely, and really gives us an early advantage for whenever that regulation does come into play, whenever that may be.
Yeah. All right, so our next question, Lakota 45. Now the spinoff of Weed Life and Him Talk is complete. What's the new valuation of MJ Link as it relates to the pending liquidity event? I don't want to answer that because that would potentially adjust how we have gone into the negotiation of the acquisition of the company. And so you'll have to, that'll be public. So that'll be information that comes out on the other side of this acquisition. We'll get back to that one. But I will add on the Weed Life side that certainly Weed Life has its own valuation and its own potential. And believe it or not, the cannabis industry, despite the fact, and this is a little bit why the network took off, I think, so rapidly, almost a decade ago, when you don't have regulation, when you have, not just here in the US, but internationally, you've got governments that are pushing back and not willing to do full regulation in an industry, in cannabis in this case, then you find more people using platforms like Weed Life to do their communication, to go out and create smaller groups to do, canvassing of their own city markets, and that sort of thing.
Local lobbying efforts.
Yeah, local lobbying efforts, exactly. So that has, Weed Life has, since the election results, has really taken off in additional usership, and that's great. I should probably, before we get too far along, Weed Life is obviously focused on a little bit like Hunt Post, going out and rolling up CBD companies, which is one of the things that we've been busy doing as well, getting through the due diligence of that. I don't expect that that's going to be a quick process because it's a just slightly different sector, and there's more negotiating that needs to take place, as well as making sure that the numbers and the books are as accurate as they say that they are. That doesn't seem to be quite as much of an issue in the hunting and fishing and camping industry. I'll leave it at that. Okay, moving right along here. Does WDLF get 5% of the revenues from the TBI all the time, or just 5% after? The short answer for all the companies is before and it's after, for every company. Let's see, we've got a second question here. Let me click on. Okay, the revenues on the last 10Q stated from non-related party. Can you elaborate on where revenue is coming from? Stated non-related. So non-related party revenue, I'm going to give you some definitions because I think it's a good question, and people who definitely go through the Qs and now the upcoming 10K, I don't always understand all of the language. Because we're a TBI, that puts us in a kind of a unique position compared to other companies that are public that report on revenue that has nothing to do client-wise with any of their revenue. We obviously, as a TBI, our clients are part of our TBI company. We sit on many of these boards, certainly the advisory committees, and so we have to have that language in there as it relates to non-related and related. Obviously, as a TBI, all of the companies that we are working with are in some way, shape, or form either existing TBI companies or future ones. And so you'll find, I guess the point is, you'll find that some non-related revenue will eventually become related, just by the nature of our business model. All right, if revenues continue to grow and if share price continues to struggle, do you have any plans to begin a share buyback initiative? Maybe. I think we always answer that. The thing is that you've got a lot of tools at your avail at different stages of a company to correct, if possible, the market cap and the value of the company. But in our case, we're going through many stages and we're doing it really quick because of our business model with these other TBI companies, and they're going through their growth stages too. And so, if you had a playbook for football or basketball or baseball or something like that, you go in knowing that the playbook really applied to the team that you were playing.
Yeah.
In our case, we've got a playbook for all of these teams that we are working with. And so it's always in flux, but it is possible. It isn't something that we're focused on today because we think that there will be other things that move that. But if those other things don't move that, then we go to that, potentially go to that plan in the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number 4, do you want to read that one?
Yeah, so I mean, they're asking this question is asking about any type of indications, never promises that were made, but any messages in 2022 that had little, that didn't come to fruition event, essentially. Talking about the 2 to 3 liquidity events that we were expecting and, what might have been the reason, any type of disclaimers or any type of communication, future expectations that can be communicated to avoid that.
I can just tell you this, that, and this is across the board, we operate as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
No one is ever sitting around waiting on stuff from us.
Yeah.
That is not the case always.
Yeah.
On the flip side of this, and all of these liquidity events are two-sided.
Yeah.
So we have as much control over the transaction as we have,
Yeah.
but not over theirs.
And I think that some of that is evident in, for instance, in the circumstance of the name change, right? I mean, that's something that we had filed all of our documentation and announced quite a long time ago. But as you guys can see, there are processes involved with FINRA and the SEC. Of course, some of in those cases, they are very backed up or undermanned. And things happen at the timing, that they're available to based on the manpower at the disposal. But like Ken said, it's never on our end that's holding up these types of things. And we are like you guys. We want these things to happen as quickly as possible and for us to be able to disclose them and communicate them to you. And as soon as we're able to, that's what we do.
Yeah. I'm excited about what's finally, feel like the logjam is loosened up here in the first quarter of this year. Certainly, without any of the other parties coming back to us, especially on the acquisition side or LOIs with HuntPost, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
That the economy has a lot to do with things. One example, although it didn't affect anything that we had projected in 2022, but you had trade show operators going into 2023 a little more diligent, spending a little bit more time on how they were going to get back to us and information they'd provide to us and those sort of things. And that's to be expected in a tough market where you don't know where the bottom is when it's coming down, or is it going to shoot back up, and will that be a permanent move back upwards, or is it going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride? So we're just dealing with market conditions on the other side of things. But the fact is that our business model is pretty simple compared to a lot of these other companies. All we have to do is come in and provide the guidance, make certain paperwork, negotiations get done. Technology, we locked down our technology years ago, which allowed us to go down this path with our business model. And so we feel very efficient on our side, and we help the inefficiencies on the other side. Okay, so we've got, let's see, some additional questions here. Share buyback, any plans to reduce share count outside of reverse stock split? I just kind of answered that. At this point, there isn't, but that is a play in the playbook. Projected to 2023 revenue estimates, what dollar value is being estimated. You're going to get the 10K that comes out, which we've already done a 2022 announcement in a 8K and press release some weeks ago. High five, by the way, because this was the 2022 was hands down our best year ever. Up 300% from the previous year. If you look at the previous few years before that, also 300% over those years, and even some previous years more than 300%. So just what does that mean? Look, it's not a ton of revenue. It just means that we're pointing in the right direction and we're making great strides. And I know that this year is going to be a huge year too, but I'm not willing to go out and say, is that 2, 3, 4, 5 times, if everything comes to fruition that we're working on right now, it could be 20 times, but that's not likely that everything we're working on right now is going to happen. And so, as we can provide that kind of information, we will. All right, do you want to get this one?
So asking about, and this is going to ultimately be a similar answer, but asking about internal company valuations. Ken, of course, had previously explained during previous podcasts about expectations of internal valuations, and has it increased? Where there will be any updates on that for new investors?
I put an internal valuation video together. I feel like it was about 1.5 years ago, maybe a couple of years, really on the tail end of many, many weeks of education on the business model because of so many new retail shareholders that had entered the company that just had no clue what we did. And so I topped off that education series of podcasts with evaluation. And the truth of the matter is that private valuations, public valuations, they're just not measured the same way. Our internal valuation continues to get much, much larger each quarter and each year as we continue to grow. But the market cap of public companies across the board, it becomes very, very distorted as you are in the nano cap and micro cap and mid cap, and it starts to become a little clearer as you get into the much, much larger companies like your Facebooks and Ubers and Amazons. I guess what you should walk away from the rub here is that we with an uplisting to a major exchange and having major market cap revenue and growth and internal valuation that starts to match up better with external market cap valuation, now is a great time to own our stock. But if you're trying to come in now and exit in months from now with some huge upside to your purchase of our share price at this point, that's a little bit of a lofty hunch. I doubt that that's going to happen. But certainly, if you're into companies long and you invest in their business model, you invest in their progress, you invest in their management team. And in our case, we've just been very diligent about continuing to show that growth. If you tuned in to us 26 months ago, right, back in December of late 2020, you would have not understood our business model. We would not have been nearly as far along as we are today. And even at that point, our market cap, our market valuation was pretty ridiculous. Probably in hindsight, there are certainly times where we think, gosh, should we have just taken the company private back in 2019 and 2020? And I'm glad that we didn't, because we have had a lot of growth come from not doing that in the last couple of years. So long-winded answer, but I also want to try to educate people along the way and share with you how we look at those sort of things internally.
And I think it's important to note, I know that, we've got shareholders out there that are constantly looking for excitement and news and updates and announcements. And we talk about these things on a regular basis. We love all of our shareholders. We love the long-term shareholders, the midterm and the short-term, even the guys that are in there day trading the stocks. And we try and communicate and be clear with all of you. But at the end of the day, We know what we're doing, and we've got our heads down building a company for the success of the long term, which ultimately benefits us and all of you guys that feel the same way about our long-term potential.
And there are two things that are happening here, because I think that it sometimes gets confused on message boards that are out there. Some people think that our business plan is to, progress the company to an uplisting and get through all of these liquidity events. Our business plan is to help these companies grow and get to a point where their founders can potentially see their own liquidity events or get access to a lot more capital to really take their business model to that next level or 2 or 3. That's what we focus on. And we report back to you that progress so that you have an idea of what path are we on and what path are they on, and how does that match up with our business model. So just understand that our business model is not to uplist the company or to make sure that the market cap equals our internal valuation.
Right.
That should all come about as long as we're doing our jobs and fulfilling a real business model here.
Yeah, and it's important to note that even, for instance, in the example of MJ Link after an acquisition, that's not the end of our, of our working relationship with a company like that. We are still unbelievably committed to the long-term success of that company and those shareholders, including ourselves. And that's why it's so critically important to find the right partner and make sure that you're doing things the right way, with the proper due diligence, which is what we do.
Look, the cannabis industry is a huge opportunity market. It's not legalized yet. Imagine what happens when it goes federal.
Right.
It's going to explode. So next question, update on lawsuits. No updates, only that they continue to go through the really fun, rapid pace of the court system. I'm being facetious there, but they are both still in play, and we're still working through all of that. Okay, AI chatbots, we kind of answered that
we did.
Earlier. AI goes well beyond that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a different
educational
podcast, because I might be able to blow your mind on where we think AI is going to bring mankind over the next
And just
decade.
so that you know, some of these capabilities with AI, like we're seeing in Chat GPT, have been out there and been utilized by us, but we are excited to see those things hit the mainstream, and really helping everyone realize that AI is here, it's going to be disruptive, and it's better to be on the right side of embracing that than on the other side of it.
Yeah, and we've been focused on it now for literally the entire length of the business since we've been in business.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. Do you want to get this next one?
Yeah. What do we have here? We did the AI ones. Someone's asking if there'll be a live Q&A. We're doing it. Okay, here we go. Well, some more questions about the lawsuits here, which we really cannot comment on at this moment.
There was a hit number 1 there, right?
Okay.
There was a judge granted the motion to dismiss in the Peak 1 case. That was a mutual dismissal. That has happened before. Few times. And anytime there's a motion, if you don't understand how the court systems work, anytime a judge says, well, we're going to grant the motion to dismiss this, the other party can then go and do a refile. So
and I want to, this right here on number 8 here, have you finished furnishing your new office? Our spy in Colorado noted the place looked like it was hit by a tornado. That's typically the case when you're first getting into a place and you've got boxes and everything else. I'm not sure when this individual came by. But certainly we are excited to show off the office, and maybe during our next podcast we'll use the Ronin camera and walk you guys around a little bit.
Yeah, we were trying to do that today, but it just didn't quite work out. So let's see. I'm just going to kind of zip through all of these. These are a bunch of good questions, but we have answered a few of them. Still realistic uplist target, or likely to have extension filed. I wish I had a crystal ball. We'll find out as we wait on some other things. that affect that timeline. But we're on track. We're on track. It doesn't mean that everybody else is on track, but that's okay. All right. Given that we fell short creating any liquidity events last year, does that make the likelihood of pushing through this year more or less certain? Well, that's a good question. It makes it more certain because of all of the momentum that, you lead up to December 31st because that's officially the last day of the year. Now you're in a new year. The momentum didn't stop. The progress didn't stop. And this is going to be the biggest year that the company has ever had.
Yeah.
It's I wish that we had everybody in the office in here, kind of telling you how excited they are, but it has just been a bunch of fun, and it's going to continue to be, and we're extremely excited about it. Sometimes so excited we get nervous about getting going too quick. But no, I think that this year, to answer your question, is going to be a great year. Liquidity events, yeah, again, those are just things that eventually end up on our balance sheet. You should note that that term gets thrown around. I almost kind of wish that I didn't use that word many years ago, because it doesn't indicate what's going to happen with the stock that day or that week or that month. There's two things that drive your stock price in our nano cap position here, which is you have retail shareholders that either have money to continue to go out and buy the stock and support the stock, or they don't have that money, which is very much what's happened, and it always happens in a year where there's a big down market. And so there's not, you can tell if you just look at our liquidity on a daily basis, it is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a cent of all of the potential stock that it could be trading that's in our float.
Yeah.
That means that there's just no dry powder out there. And so the other side of this equation is where you've got to get to the other group of investors that are out there that have the ability to invest in that stock. As you get on uplist the stock, you can get on other exchanges through dual listings, and that's where now you can reach an additional audience, and that's of course what we've now been working on for some time. And only at that point does it start to really represent or bring in a clearer picture on what's happening with the value of the company. The liquidity events, when those happen, that just means that the next quarter, when we do the next 10Q, or the next year on the 10K, it now is showing up on the balance sheet. And so those other type of investors, those investors that like to invest in companies that are not just, nano cap or penny stock companies, they look at that stuff. They don't tune into what you guys are saying on message boards and get excited about investing because you're excited about it. They're reading those balance sheets. And so that's what those liquidity events eventually end up looking like for them as they review our filings. I hope that made sense. Okay, we should probably pick up the pace here, huh? I know people get impatient from time to time listening to us talk. Has anything changed with the 5 cent minimum level to consider with the reverse stock split? Of course, let me add to that minimum level is to get to NASDAQ. And so, not at this stage anyway, but also, getting to NASDAQ is not realistic in the near future here. And that reverse stock split expires here in the next couple of months. So, we'll just see what happens. Most likely what happens afterwards. Okay. And what I meant by that is what happens after that expires. Okay. Kind of covered all that. Names change. Well, I'll address this one. How important was it to get the name change through? And does that clear the path for any specific liquidity events? And can you elaborate on this has been confused almost out of control on message boards. The name change had nothing to do with the liquidity events. The name change is for the uplisting of the company and other things related to those kind of filings. And we could have gone through all that that paperwork and started to do those filings without the name change, then the name change happens, and then you got to go back and refile those things. So it's, you know, it's kind of silly, and we didn't want to bother with that. But at the same time, it wasn't holding up anything because the liquidity events are on their own path and trajectory. And so the name change happened. That's great, but it really has nothing to do with the liquidity events. Okay, yes, we're good with the furnishing of the office. Kenta, I'm just going to speed read through here. Will gain is security tokens and trade regulations for companies. How different is it that we're doing the upstream and merge exchange doing? I'm not 100% sure I understand that, but what I'll tell you is that we are still focused on being able to do a dual listing on upstream and the WDLF token to be on that exchange, as well as many other exchanges. So in case you thought that was the only exchange we were going to be on. How can we get a full system demo of all the capabilities of the platform and the business value? Use the networks, I guess, but certainly we don't have the time or the bandwidth to walk investors through everything that it can do. Sorry, don't mean to be be quite like that, but the fact is that we.
You would want us spending our time on things that are going to progress the company.
Yeah, and when we're working 80 to 100 hours a week, just trying to get through that part of it, stopping and going through all the technology, and the technology is constantly evolving from company to company that uses it and needs to be customized for that particular business model. Okay, so I feel like that was. I don't see any real additional questions here, so I'm going to close, and I don't know about the chat. Let's see, we have the chat box. Okay, well, I think that we probably covered it, but if we didn't cover your question or you had some additional questions, get on WDLF.net, post your question up there. If it's a question that has already been answered or others already know the answer to it, sometimes they'll answer that for you. Otherwise, from time to time when we're on there, we'll try to cover that as well. We are going into our 30-day quiet period, starting the, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, before the 10K gets filed. We're working towards having the 10K filed maybe a little bit earlier, but that's, again, on our side. That's probably going to show up right around the 31st of March. As usual, I say that every year. But anyway, that's that quiet period will get up and running, and there would just be certain things we can't answer during that period. Yeah. So try to get those questions posted. I guess the point is try to get those questions posted up on WDLF.net before then, and we'll try to get back to you. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you more often here, or having you see us more often now that we're in the new space. And definitely tune in to as many of the video updates that and interviews that we're doing with these other executives throughout the next month and quarter and so on and so forth. Take care, everyone.
Pleasure, guys.
All right.
See you soon.
Bye now.